Hi, this is Professor of Photography Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 7 of the History of Photography podcast. This episode's primary subject is Tina Modotti. Modotti, born in 1896 and died in 1942, was an Italian photographer, a model, an actress, and also a revolutionary political activist. She was born in Udine, in Friuli, Italy, in the north, and in 1913, at the age of 16, she emigrated to the United States to join her father, where he lived in San Francisco, California. In 1918, she moved to Los Angeles in order to pursue a career in the motion picture industry, and in fact did quite a bit of acting while in Los Angeles. But also while there, she met the photographer Edward Weston. By 1921, Modotti was Weston's favorite model, and as was often the case with Weston's female models, ended up being his lover. Modotti convinced Weston to teach her photography, and the work that Modotti and Weston made in the 1920s marks the beginning of a modernist photographic aesthetic that left an indelible mark in the history of photography, especially the history of photography in Mexico, as we'll travel to in just a few minutes. Each person, Weston and Modotti, contributed to this history individually. Modotti is known for beautiful still life images that gave way to modernist images of Mexican workers and poetic revolutionary icons. And of course, Weston's pictorialist influenced imagery was abandoned by him in favor of sharp, clear, straight photographs. And while I won't spend too much time here talking about Edward Weston, because we've spoken about him quite a bit before in the History of Photography class podcasts, I will show a few images by Weston of Tina Modotti as his model. And to give you a little bit of a sense of the relationship that they had, I thought I'd read you a little section of a letter that Modotti wrote to Weston. "One night after," she wrote, "one night after, all day I have been intoxicated with the memory of last night and overwhelmed with the beauty and madness of it. I need but to close my eyes and find myself not once more, but still near you in that beloved darkness, with the flavor of wine yet on my lips and the impression of your mouth on mine. Oh, how wonderful to recall every moment of our frail and precious dreams. And now, while I write you, from my still quivering sense rises an ardent desire again to kiss your eyes and mouth. My lips burn and my whole being quivers from the intensity of my desire." Yowza! There is Tina Modotti writing about her love for Edward Weston. And as we look at a couple of more photographs that Weston made of Modotti, I thought it might be interesting to share at least something about what Weston wrote about his relationships with women. "I have no illusions about the women who fall in love with me. Women are hero worshippers. I would like to be loved for myself, which means I would like to be a highly charged sexual animal. But would I? We can't have everything. I am a poor lover in that I have no time or desire for sustained interest. I make a grand beginning, then lose out through indifference. The idea means more to me than the actuality." Well, it seems like Modotti and Weston may have been on slightly different pages in terms of their ardor for one another, but nevertheless, their relationship was extremely important to each of them, and certainly fed the artwork that each of them did as they both worked in Mexico, moving there together, and Weston abandoning his wife and most of his children, taking his son Chandler along with to Mexico and leaving his wife behind in California. So, in addition to her various roles as an actress and a model and a muse, Modotti created a photographic body of work that developed over time from early formal photographs to later images that showed a commitment to social causes. Most viewers of Modotti's work as a photographer see her strong, expressive power, which seems to have risen out of both her unique pictorial language as well as what several people refer to as her unmistakable humanity, combining great artistic form with engaged social content. Modotti's early work featured architecture, especially architectural interiors, and flowers and urban landscapes, and lyrical studies of Mexican peasants and workers. And that work of that focused on Mexican peasants and workers, focusing on the indigenous people of Mexico, was based in part on the belief, both Modotti's belief and also the belief of other artists and intellectuals of the time in the 1920s, that it was through the indigenous culture that Mexico could redeem itself and create its own national identity. The Mexican Revolution was a major armed struggle that started in 1910 and lasted for the better part of a decade until around 1920. Over time, the revolution changed from a revolt against the established order to a multi-sided civil war with frequently shifting power struggles, and so it's often referred to as the Mexican Civil War or the Mexican Revolution, sort of in some ways one and the same, starting out as a revolution and really ending more as a civil struggle. And it was the most important socio-political event in Mexico and one of the greatest upheavals of the 20th century, resulting in important experimentation and also important reformation in social organization in Mexico. And as is often the case with revolutions, artists took up the cause. And in Mexico in the 1920s, painters like Diego Rivera, whose images we see here, and a photograph of him in the upper left corner, and Frieda Kahlo were alive, and artists and intellectuals from many countries of the world came together in Mexico and involved themselves in the revolutionary movement. So it was logical that Modotti would align herself with other artists like Rivera, and here we have some work by Frieda Kahlo, one of her self-portraits, and also an image called Roots. So these things are all intertwined, and one of the things I think everyone who looks at the history of the medium of photography is sort of always noticing is how important all of these little valences are. It's not just Modotti photographing in Mexico, but Modotti's influenced by Weston and Modotti's interest in the revolution that she encountered while in Mexico. So by the middle of the 1920s, Modotti had joined the Communist Party in Mexico, and her photographs and her activities took on a heavier political overtone. In 1930, the Mexican government created an anti-communist campaign, and Modotti was expelled from Mexico and sailed on a ship for Europe. The Italian government tried to bring her back to Italy so that she could be charged as a subversive national, but she was able to evade the fascist police and went on instead to move on to Germany and Switzerland. Her late work is characterized by a strongly modernist poetic iconography, heavy-handed in a way, but so very evocative of the world that she was experiencing, especially the intersection of the revolution in Mexico and her interest in communism. Modotti stopped in Berlin and, as I mentioned, in Switzerland, intending to secretly make her way back to Italy to join the anti-fascist resistance, but instead her lack of funds and what she referred to as the deteriorating condition of Central Europe caused her to move to Moscow in 1931. And at that point, she abandoned photography to devote herself to political activism, and that would carry her through the remainder of her relatively short life. In 1939, she returned to Mexico and would die 3 years later of heart failure, but there are some suggestions of some potential political wrongdoing in her death, and I'll include some resources on the photohistory.jeffcurto.com webpage to help you flesh out some of the details of Modotti's life. The poet Pablo Neruda, another compatriot of Modotti's, composed her epitaph, part of which can be found on her tombstone. Pure your gentle name, pure your fragile life, bees, shadows, fire, snow, silence, and foam, combined with steel and wire and pollen to make up your firm and delicate being. So a fascinating figure, really an interesting woman, strong of heart, strong of mind, and strong of her commitment to photography and its way of communicating visually some of the political ideas that she was particularly interested in. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the History of Photography podcast, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. Don't forget to check out the History of Photography class sessions available on the web at photohistory.jeffcurto.com or in the podcast feed. And while you're on the web, take a look at my other podcast, cameraposition.com, a podcast about the creative side of photography.